All right, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm super honored to be hosting this panel. Thank you for being here. This is our first panel talk for the 2022 CreateSpace Residency. Some general housekeeping again, just for those joining us. Please remember to stay muted. We also have closed captioning available. So please see the CC icon on your Zoom toolbar below for any subtitle settings that you may require. We also have an ASL interpreter, Christina, who is pinned, but if you need to pin her, please remember to do so. We will also be taking questions towards the end, and the chat box will be available as well. And for those of us just joining, this is also recorded for archival purposes and to be shared later on. So thank you all for joining us for the Art and Accessibility in Public Spaces panel talk. I will be your host for tonight. My name is Belinda Owase, and I'm the Arts Programs Coordinator with STEPS. A little bit about STEPS. If you're not familiar with us, we foster dynamic and inclusive communities through public art and creative placemaking. We transform urban spaces into vibrant places through cultural planning, community arts, and artist capacity building programs. I specifically work on the CreateSpace programming, such as the 2022 residency, public art residency. But yeah, all of our information will also be linked in the chat below if you wish to stay in touch. All of our socials will be available there. Before we begin our discussion, I would just like to share a land acknowledgement, and STEPS wishes to acknowledge the sacred land on which we operate out of and where many of us are meeting today. It has been the site of human activity for 15,000 years. The territories include the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. The territory subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share for the resources of the Great Lakes, taking only what is needed and ensuring the dish is never left empty for others. Today, the meeting place of Te Toronto is home to a large, active, and diverse urban Indigenous community from many nations across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to use this land to share ideas and generate creativity. As a public arts organization, we recognize our privilege in working on stolen and unceded lands and are working to unlearn colonial structures to move forwards and towards reconciliation. In the chat, you will see that we have shared a link to the nativeland.ca. This is a great starting point to help learn about the traditional Indigenous territories that we currently reside in, as well as treaties, communities, and languages. We recognize that this is a virtual event and we all reside in different places, and therefore we encourage everyone to learn about the lands that we call home and about the Indigenous communities that we share this land with today. Without further ado, we will now begin our panel talk. I thank you all for joining us tonight, and I'm going to pass it off first to Jenel, and then she will pass it off to our three panelists today, Queen, Ysabelle, and Salima. Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries.
So before we get started, I just wanted to quickly let you guys know a little bit about arts accessibility with STEPS on this presentation or this panel discussion. So Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba is a regional not-for-profit artist-run organization dedicated to the full inclusion of artists and audiences within, oh, sorry, my screen keeps going funny. The full inclusion of artists and audiences with disabilities into all facets of the arts community. Our mandate is to facilitate a network of artists and stakeholders from both the arts and the disability communities that supports artists with disabilities in achieving individual artistic excellence, promotes higher visibility of these artists within all disciplines, and promotes policies and practices intended to make the arts more accessible to all. I'd also like to acknowledge the land that AANM sits on and that we operate. So AANM is located on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene people in the homeland of the Métis Nation. Winnipeg's water is sourced from Shaw Lake Forest Nation, and I would like to acknowledge that it wasn't until the fall of 2021 that the members of the Shaw Lake 40 First Nation finally had access to the safe drinking water with the building of a new treatment plant, which ended their water advisory, which was on for 24 years, while everyone in Winnipeg was able to enjoy fresh water. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let me tell you a little bit about myself. First off, I'll just give you a visual description for anyone who's blind or low vision there. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s. I have long brown hair with purple ends that's in a ponytail, and I'm wearing a gray shirt. I'm going to be your facilitator. I'll be helping guide the discussion. It's going to be a very casual discussion and, very loose, and it should be fun and be very interesting to hear from everyone. So personally, I'm a self-taught artist, and my art focuses learning on new ways, new crafts to explore artistic expression. I graduated with my master's in disability studies from the University of Manitoba. My dissertation was called An Autoethnological Study of Art as a Tool of Empowerment. And with that, I examined my own experiences of mental illness and disability art. Currently, I'm the executive director for Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba, as well as the liaison director for the Manitoba Cultural Society of the Deaf. So I'd like to introduce our speakers who we're going to let introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Salima. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you?
Thanks, Jenel. My name is Salima Punjani. I'm a brown-skinned woman with curly reddish-brown hair. I'm wearing earrings made with a lot of love from a friend that have macrame yellow yarn on them with lots of different speckles of color, and are really fun to kind of to comb while I'm wearing them. I would say that I'm also a self-taught artist. I would describe my art as multisensory, and I try and create as many entry points as possible so that folks can experience my art in lots of different ways. So what that means is that there might be vibrotactile, or like the vibrational energy of sound. So that's one part of my work. Another part is tactile photography for folks that are blind or low vision to be able to touch photographs. I use smell and lots of different things so that people can interact with my work in a lot of different ways. I also have a master's in social work in which I focused on the intersection of the arts and care. I thought a lot about how to do trauma-informed relational artwork. And that's the end of my thought.
Great, thanks, Salima. Next, we're going to go with Ysabelle. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Ysabelle Vautour. I am currently on a treaty of the Peace and Friendship Treaty in what's known as Fredericton or Willistook. I am a visual artist as well. My practice is focused on kind of like a playing with the ideas of ableism, and I want people to view things differently through art. I've been working with installation, and I'm currently in a mural training program with the Inspire Festival here in New Brunswick.
Wonderful, thanks, Ysabelle. And last but not least, we have Queen.
Hi, everyone. I am a Black woman with, my name is Queen Kukoyi. I am a Black woman with head wrap on and kinky coily hair. I have on a burgundy shirt with a burgundy and gold necklace. I am a Black Bayesian of Igbo and Lakota ancestry. I'm queer, gender fluid, femme presenting. I'm a mother and an author, an arts educator. I won an award for my work from my school doing social work, Centennial College, international artist. My new art practice, so my background is in spoken word poetry and digital collaging and animations, but I've been exploring Zentangle art more intentionally as a form to support helping me focus about different topics that I'm exploring around my mental health, just trying to understand more how, you know, in the past, I've been using Zentangle art as a forum to support stimming for focus. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thanks, Queen. Before we get started with the panel, could one of the steps people take the stop screen sharing so we could see the panelists better? There we go. Great, so let's just start right off and start with our first question. So how does making accessible public art increase access for all participants, not just those that are deaf or disability or disabled? Does anyone want to take a shot at it first?
I can go.
Great.
I think in any case, if we're talking about equity, like ensuring that the most marginalized groups are heard, understood, and cared for first will make will have everything accessible for all.
Yeah, absolutely. Salima, Ysabelle, do you guys have any thoughts on it?
Sure, yeah. Hi, it's Salima speaking. Or Ysabelle, would you like to go first?
Oh, go ahead.
So I think for me, seeing people interact with my work and being able to touch and play and move things around and feel vibrations and things like that, I think having all of these different senses integrated into work helps to create a really like embodied way of being with art. But then also like I feel that using multiple senses helps to create environments where people can deeply listen a bit better, whatever listening means. I don't just mean like by hearing, I mean in lots of different ways. So if listening means maybe holding vibrations or taking a big smell of a cushion or something, like I know that sounds a bit weird, but I feel that like just seeing people interact with my work, whether they're disability identified or not, I think it does help to create these environments of listening and receptivity and connection and empathy. And that's the end of my thought.
I don't think your artwork is weird. I think your artwork is fantastic, Salima. I really want to experience it one of these days when I'm either you come to my province or I come to yours, or your artwork's all over the world and I can see it. I think that when we create spaces to start discussion around like ableism, accessibility, anything with a even just leadership with persons with disabilities, like I think this kind of gets people thinking, and because a lot of the issues have to do with this kind of old ideas, and when we bring new ideas in an art space, I feel like people are more receptive to take them in. This week is, or at least where I am, this week is Disability Awareness Week. I feel like a lot of people are aware that persons with disabilities exist. It's not what, but maybe they're not aware of like the systemic barriers, the little comments, the little the nitty gritty of what it feels like to be in a different body than an able-bodied person might feel, because I feel like this community tends to be overlooked a lot or forgotten about a lot. It's just not in people's minds. There's like the default, and then oh yeah, you know. So if it's right out there and people are talking about it, then it's more in people's minds, and maybe a little bit more access happens. If just a little bit more access happens and it just becomes a little bit more normal, then it kind of may grow, is my thought.
Yeah. And since you brought in the word ableism, I don't know if too many people know that term, so I thought I'd just talk a little bit, and maybe we could talk a bit more about that as well. So ableism is kind of the idea that someone is looked as less as, or is discriminated against for not being able-bodied. And so it's like Ysabelle said, all those microaggressions, you know, places aren't expecting you perhaps, so they don't let attendance in for free, or they don't have ASL, or they don't have a ramp. Yeah, and so I think ableism is something that we really need to talk about and acknowledge. And the more we talk about it, the more we can make change. So have you guys ever encountered any ableist kind of actions in your artwork, or have you had to so I'm kind of throwing a question that you guys don't know about yet, so I apologize for that. But that's something that I run into quite often when we're trying to, say, find a venue for a space. We call a space and they don't even know what their access is. And so that's, yeah, an example of ableism.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely things to think about. Like for myself, I because of my disability, I don't drive. And say simple things like when I need to get to different places, and where I live, it's quite rural, so there's no bus. And if there is a bus, it only goes at once in the day. So that means like I'll have to stay overnight to wherever place I want to go for, like, say, an hour. Or it's so far, you know what I mean? Like there's all these things that kind of accumulate. So if I don't know ahead of schedule where things are going to be, I need to find somebody to take me to those places, and not only just take me, but stay, because I don't know how long things go. Because in the arts, there's a lot of that, like, oh, can't you just be flexible? Can't you just stay a little longer? It's like, yes, I can. But the person who, you know, is helping me may or may not want to. So it's not just me, it's like, it's other people sometimes. That's just one example that happened to me recently, but yeah, for sure.
What about Salima, Queen? Have you guys encountered anything? Or if not, that's okay too.
I mean,
it kind of goes in with a second question of, oh yeah.
Like navigating like panic attacks when things aren't going well in a professional setting it's never easy. Sometimes I feel embarrassed by them. I've been like late to things because I've had panic attacks, because I've gotten like lost, or sometimes for like no particular reason at all. And because people don't understand mental health, or there's a stigma around mental health, it's hard to explain. Like I kind of turn it almost into a joke when I arrive, like, yeah, I had like a little mini panic attack. You know, sometimes people like, they look at you a type of way, trying to explain, you know, a way like why your art is the way it is, why I include, you know, looking at like my mental health through like an Afrofuturist lens. It's hard for people to understand at time when I'm trying to elaborate on that. So really trying to understand like language I can use to describe these things, I guess. And I feel like we shouldn't have to make things accessible for people who don't have accessibility issues. But yeah, just discovering language and stuff like that, it's been tricky to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to kind of like downplaying or joking off, you know, with your disabilities. I mean, I had panic attacks too, and I cry. So I've definitely had a few meetings where I just keep crying and like, I'm okay, I'm just gonna cry. And it's very embarrassing, but yeah, it's something. What about you, Salima? Have you ran into anything like that? Pardon?
So yeah, it's happened in meetings. I'm like, I'm fine, just keep going.
Just keep going, yeah.
Hi, it's Salima speaking. So I think for me, it may not be such obvious things, but when I think about having MS and having cognitive fatigue and general fatigue, I need a lot more time to do things, and I'm often put in positions where I'm rushing, or there's not like structures of care, whether it's real transparency over what is and isn't possible. I feel pretty lucky that I've had a chance to learn from folks at like Tangled Arts and like taking part in different trainings and things where I've had a chance to learn about how to really ask for what I need. And I think one of the things that I find a bit challenging sometimes is that even if people have the intention of wanting to like welcome whatever I need or like that conversation, that sometimes there's just not organizational capacity to actually do the things. And so I think for me, in terms of thinking about accessibility and my needs and ableism, I think that transparency, even if folks maybe don't have the capacity, is super important, because at least then I can make an informed decision, and I can offer the ability to make an informed decision to other disabled folks of whether or not they feel they can participate in something. And so I think that's kind of how ableism shows up for me. It's like there's the intention and then there's honesty, and I would really prefer the honesty instead of just a nice intention. That's the end of my thought.
Yeah, I think we could all definitely agree with that. And one thing that you talked about, which I really relate with, I've heard this term before, crip time. And what that means is that sometimes things may take a little bit longer, you need breaks and that sort of thing. And a lot of times, people are so rushed, they want to get through things quickly, and it's just not possible. So thank you for bringing that up. And this kind of goes into our next question about what access means to you. What do you think of access, and what does it mean?
I like what Salima said about transparency and being able to vocalize what your needs are. And I think that that's what access means to me, like feeling safe enough to be able to do that. Like I have a really amazing business partner who's in the audience right now, Nico, who like we're the organization, the type of organization we're trying to build, it centers mental health and wellness and being able to have open dialogue about, things like burnout, things like when I'm overwhelmed or if I'm like struggling to write an email, because sometimes I have bipolar too. So sometimes to like write like 3 sentences can take me like 45 minutes because of the overthinking. So sometimes when it's like that, she'll like support me in those ways with like forming my thoughts or helping me like refocus on something like that. And, she's overwhelmed. She's able to convey those things to me as well. And access to me means being able to vocalize those things, but I feel like you can't do that in like a regular workplace. And the hope is for eventually for people to be able to like vocalize those things. Queen speaking, and I'm done my thought.
Yeah, being able to say what you need is very, very important. Ysabelle, Salima, what about you guys for access?
I think it's the ability for participation would be the main thing. How can I interact? Can I interact as much as other people? Am I supported? Do I feel safe, like Queen said, to do these things? I think too, like that hesitancy or fear to, or not hesitant, like I find myself doing this too. Like a few of you said, where you have to kind of almost justify your existence. It's like, oh, I do this weird thing. Like I'm this weird disabled person and I do this weird thing and I need to explain it to you. And it's like, why? You know, like why? Why do I have to explain? Like, why can't you, you know, like anything that's remotely not normal? And it's like, like if, what's the percentage? Like the percentage in my province is like 1/4 of people. So if you've got 4 people in the room, you know, likely one of them has it's not that uncommon is what I'm trying to say. So I feel like there's more, but that's my thought for now.
No, that's great. I think in 2017, there was a study they did to find out the numbers of disability, and it's something about 1 in 5 or 20% of Canadians identify as having a disability. So we're quite the large minority.
Yes. Yeah.
Salima, what about for you? What does access mean?
I mean, it means a lot of things. I think that sometimes access can, like people, like whenever I'm asked about like access, because I'm often asked about like, you know, like how can we make things more accessible or what should we do or whatever. And I think sometimes people expect a checklist, and to me, that's not what access is. It's really about listening and asking people how, what it would take for them to feel cared for or to be able to be present, whether that's on a live stream or whether that's in person. I think like, yeah, like I think like the thing that I would really emphasize on that is that, you know, like access needs can be competing, they can be ebbing and flowing and consistently changing. And so I think access for me is like this, I guess, commitment to care and commitment to listening and commitment to trying my best to welcome folks. And whether that's through my artistry or through my advocacy, I think too, like when I think about accessibility, it's also about having fun and it's like, who can I invite to the party? You know, like it's fun. It's thinking about how to like hack the senses. It's thinking about not only how to like create work that invites people to experience it in a lot of different ways. It's about thinking about how fun it is to, you know, consider taking a photograph to touch, how fun it is to think about recording sound to be held in vibrations. Like, I think sometimes thinking about the word access can feel like heavy, or there's like this heaviness to it, but I'd like to bring a kind of alternative view of like access is love isn't my thing. I believe that's Alice Wong's movement, but I really honor like these like Crip ancestors and what they've brought to create this space of, you know, thinking of access as love. And that's kind of what I think about. That's the end of my thought.
Yeah, if I could add quickly to that, I think seeing like disability-led spaces, I think is amazing. Like it makes a huge difference because there is that commitment there. It's not like oh, I thought about this one time and I put it in the paper and it looks good, you know. It's just it's like, no, there's a care, like Salima said, like, and there's a attention, a commitment. Yeah, for sure. You can definitely tell the difference.
Totally. And it's Salima speaking again. I think too, like access is not thinking about something last minute, again, coming back to time. Like I think about how I write grants now, and it's like there's like audio captioning and description and ASL and everything included within the grant writing process itself. So it's not an add-on after the fact. It's like I've tried my best to integrate that into the planning of projects that haven't even come to life yet. So that's another part of it that I think is important to add.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like there's so much more to explore that question. Could go on and on. Yeah.
I love that idea though of access as care, because that's really what it is. It's about caring for the individual that's coming into your space and welcoming them and trying to find the ways that they're most comfortable in that space. So I love that idea of access as care. That's great.
You know what? I
Just
once
before we
had
go to the next,
sorry. I just had an example of sometimes it's like, yes, to fit it to that individual, but sometimes it's like when I enter a space and my needs were thought of without even me having to say anything is so amazing. Like it's rare that that happens, but it feels so good. It's like, oh, wow. Like I feel so welcomed in this space. Yeah, sorry.
no, that's a very good point, because, always constantly fighting for access and the accommodations you need is tiring. It can be exhausting. So to have that in place when you go into a space, it just does. It makes that you feel welcome, you feel loved. It's a safe space. So it's very important. I just want to let everyone know before we go on to our next question, in about 20 minutes, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back. So that'll be at 5:55. We'll take a 5-minute. But until then, let's move on to our next question. I'm sure you guys have really good answers for this, and I'm really excited about this question, is how do you include accessibility into your art practice? Salima, did you want to start? Because I know you do a lot with like multisensory and touch and feel. So do you want to kick it off for us?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think in a couple different ways. One thing that I'm really getting into these days is learning more about audio description. And so I recently had like this documentation of work that had the captioning, audio description, everything included in one film. And so that's one way, is thinking about the documentation of work and like the different things to bring to it. Another part is like, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, so I won't go too much into it, but like, like having tactile things that people can interact with, having like smell and touch. I'm yet to use taste, it's a bit harder. And even smell because of synthetics. So it's like competing access needs of like, I don't want to like trigger a migraine in someone, but or whatever, sensitivities. And yeah, just kind of really thinking about different ways that people can interact with work, but then also giving people the option not to if they don't want to. So it's like just being really clear of that the choice is up to the viewer or like the audience member. And then also in terms of what I'm hoping to include more, but quite honestly, it's hard to be like an artist and focusing just on my artistry, which is already integrating access, but then also thinking about, doing all the accessibility consulting for my own work at the same time. So it's kind of like a lot that ends up falling on my shoulders of like, thinking about making visual stories of like, how do you get there? How do you, like what kind of space is it? Are there washrooms that are gender neutral? Are there washrooms that are accessible? All of these things of like, it's not only about the artistry and that work, but I think as well, the things that come around people making a choice of whether that work is something that they feel they would be welcome to experience. That's the end of my thought.
Yeah, that's good. I love the idea of having it open. They can choose whether or not they want to experience the different aspects of it. Queen, Ysabelle, how do you guys include accessibility into your art practice?
I think, sorry, Queen speaking. Nico and myself as an artist collective try to, whenever we're doing a project, to do like, I can't remember the phrasing now, but like something like a community call out. Like when we're gonna do a project, we'll ask the people around us, our audience, like what they might need from us in regards to doing the program. We tried to do like explore the landscape and the setting to which we're entering into, to try to make things as accessible as possible, including things like ASL. And I like what Salima said about including more audio stuff. I was like, oh, we should do that. So thank you for that. Thinking about ways in which, that we can include things like that in our art practice, participating in talks like this, whether as panelists or as observers, to learn more about what the needs are of the community we serve. I think it's also done through like evaluations before and after. That was the word I was looking for, evaluations. Before and after, you know, and then making sure that we embed those things the next time we do things, so that we're constantly getting better and constantly making things more accessible for our audiences, but also like future audiences that we might not even know want to participate or want to be a part of anything that we're doing. In my personal art practice, my art has just mainly been for me, and if people like it, they like it. I think I've been practicing for a while, but it's been a struggle to like even see myself, I guess. As an artist, I kind of just been putting stuff out there to foster opportunities for dialogues, mainly around conversations around my mental health and other folks who struggle with mental health, to try to like normalize, you know, the conversations around mental health and history and all these different things. So yeah, Queen, and I'm done speaking.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you said about community consultations and speaking with the community and getting the feedback afterwards, because, you know, accessibility is ever evolving. You know, as we go on, we learn about new access needs from people. So there's no one space that can be 100% accessible, because it's always changing. So I really love that idea of including feedback so that you can keep on improving. That's a wonderful idea. And what about you, Ysabelle? How do you include accessibility?
Much like Queen, I had that feeling of like, oh, I gotta make, like, I want to make art for myself. And that's how I started my practice a few years ago. So I'm still new to creating work that is accessible. It's never as accessible as I'd like it to be, because I'm perfectionistic that way. And most of my work was created for me only, and then it got out there and it's like, oh, now it's in the public. Now I have to think about this thing afterwards instead of integrating it. So now that I'm creating new work with, you know, displaying it, then it's a different shift in what I need to do. So one of the things that I did, I created the NB Disability Art Collective because I know what I need. That's not a problem. I know how to make something accessible for me. And when I think about accessibility, I literally think of people that I know. I'm like, oh, well, how would so-and-so enjoy this? How would they experience this? And that's literally how I go about it. And I think, okay, blah, blah, blah. I feel like I'm a party planner, you know, like, oh, you know, this person likes this and this person likes this. And, da, 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 da. And that's literally how I go about it. So for our first show that we had earlier this year, we put the artwork at wheelchair height because one of the members was in a wheelchair, and it's like, well, she wasn't able to read the tickets. It's not like she asked me to do this and then she was like, oh, and then she was like, yeah, I never, you know, and it's like, you know, it's good to kind of consider or anticipate people's needs that way. I am learning as much as I can about audio description. Being a person of the blind community, I appreciate the creative aspect of audio description. So a lot of it I like to do myself. Of course, I can't do it all myself. There's certain things that I can't do. But I do like to integrate it in the work. So it's not like this stale voiceover thing that you have to pay, you know, like these other people to do. Like it feels detached from the work, and I like it when it's more creative, but that's just a personal style. And the other thing is that right now I am I'm doing an artist residency with a local group called the New Brunswick Coalition of Persons with Disabilities. It's sponsored by the New Brunswick Arts Board. So essentially I am like an art facilitator in my residency. So I will be hosting Zoom meetings once a month, and we'll talk about the art that they want to create. I've suggested maybe like identity as a theme, like, you know, to explore who they want to be, what the kind of art that they want to make in the various mediums that they want to make it. Because I feel like people's voices are important to be heard. And I think that like one of the ideas for that we may do is like puppetry, because it has different forms. So like the writing of it could be, one person could do it, right? The physical making of the puppet is the sculptural aspect. The puppet could have like a sculptural base with joints and things, but then the head would be like, you know, painted, which is another aspect. You know what I mean? Like I love what I've learned from being a disabled human for all of my life, is that the more options you have, the better people can participate. So yeah, it's I'm sure there's more, but that's what I got for the time being.
No, that's great. And I agree with you. Audio descriptions or image descriptions, they're an art form all on their own, if done correctly, right? You know, because you don't want to read some dry, you know, this object's here, this object there.
Yeah.
You know, you want to hear passion, right? So you
Like,
want
I
to
don't-
be able to
yeah.
still, yeah.
Like,
Exactly,
I don't
feel
care how
passion.
many things are in this, you know, like I want, what is it? You know what I mean? Before you start describing all these things, anyway. And it's like, there's only so much space that I have in my head, you know? But yeah, I was gonna say something and I forgot. I do, oh yes, the advocacy and the consultation is mostly how things get done. It seems like when I apply for a lot of art calls and things like that, and often it seems like I'm either one of the first people to ever apply to something like that. So then I become the representative, and then it's like you know, I feel like I'm setting the stand. It's like, well, this is not my job, but then it piles on me, and then you know, the overwhelm, and so it kind of becomes, you know, my side job while I'm doing my current art job. And then we talk about prep time, and it's like the window, and then you know, the chronic pain, and then the window is so small. So
Yeah, you know, that's kind of like the burden that artists with disabilities have, is that they're constantly having to advocate for themselves and exert that extra energy, which often we don't have, but we find it somewhere because it has to be done. Yeah, it can be very frustrating and tiring.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something Ysabelle just said. It's about like chronic pain, and I have limited mobility, so I cannot, like, a lot of my things that I do are like super heavy. So I like need support with that stuff, and often have to hire on, you know, people to support, because Nicole can't lift everything. And yeah, because like my arm's not in a sling at the moment, because I'm not in as much pain. People don't see the limited mobility that I have, and I find myself like people looking at me like, why aren't you helping? I have to be like, oh, I can't lift things, and like constantly feeling like I have to repeat that, or just like putting on the sling to go so I don't have to like explain it to people. But yeah, sorry, just
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's the great debate, right, between invisible illness and visible disabilities, right? Oftentimes those with visible disabilities, you know, they get more help, but they also get more pity and people thinking they can't do anything, while those with invisible disabilities are constantly saying, like, sure, I didn't use a cane today, but I need it today. I didn't use one yesterday, but today I need it. And people not understanding, you know, or if you're in a wheelchair, that you doesn't mean that you can't walk. Some people can get up and walk, but only for a few steps, right? And you know, you have to defend your disability. And any more thoughts about accessibility in the art practice before we go to our next question?
I feel like that's that thing that you explained with invisible disability versus the visible ones. That's where a lot of the ableism comes in the question, because then it's like, you know, if you have a visible disability, then you can't take that off. That's how you exist. But people who have an invisible disability, some of them, they can't play the role, but some of them can. Like I can do that. I have like these weird accessibility tools that, like, why would you wear a telescope on your face? You know, it's a weird object. People look at you funny, and it's fine. You know, I'm used to it. But all these thoughts, and it's you know, it's not that whole. I remember when I was young, I didn't want to wear it because it's like, oh, it's not cool to wear that. It's like, why isn't it cool to be a person with a disability? We're cool. Have you listened to these other people on the panel? Like, seriously, you guys are cool. You know, it's like the aesthetic of the, I don't know, what do you want to call it, like a crip aesthetic or a disability art aesthetic, you know, that it looks, you know, it's cool to have that look or whatever. And or if you have that look, there's certain connotations of what that look means, and that's the problem that you're kind of talking about when you talk about those two different things. I've been thinking about that a lot this week, actually. So it's funny you bring that up.
Well, since we're so close to our break, maybe we'll just take our break now and save the last question for when we get back. So it is, well, in Winnipeg 5:50, but it's somewhere 50 where everyone else is. So we'll take a 5 minute and come back at 5:55 or 55, 56, 6, wherever you are, 5 minutes. So I'm making it way more confusing. Okay, so everyone take 5 and we'll be right back.
Thanks, Jenel.
Thank you.
You know what? Actually, let's just get started. Queen can join in when she comes back. So our last question that we're going to talk about is how to make safe spaces for artists who are neurodivergent or have mental health. So Ysabelle or Salima, did you guys want to get us started? Just to give an example of something that we do at AAM is that I have a little bowl full of fidget toys that are free for anyone who comes in who can take one, whether they be children or adults, everyone takes one. It seems just to give them something to play with their hands to concentrate that fidgetiness that some people experience. So that's one thing that we do at my space.
Hi, it's Salima speaking. I think one thing that I find helpful is considering like a trauma-informed approach, in which giving people I guess the option to participate in the way they feel or they don't feel. And so like not having any pressure to like, you know, like talk if they don't want to, or like if I'm facilitating more so, I think being clear if there are moments of like obligatory participation or something, like just kind of creating the space for people to just show up as they are. But I feel like I think that's all I can really say about that question.
Thanks, Salima. What about Ysabelle, Queen? How do you guys think we can make safe spaces for artists that are neurodivergent or have mental health?
I would say like accept all forms of stimming. I know in particular in the public school system, stimming as like what people call doodling, it's actually a way to support focus. And I found when I was able to, and when teachers were allowed me to used as like an entry point or an access point for being able to absorb information, would create like these really intricate patterns that would have like some of the words adapted into it from the lesson. And I'd remember everything so much easier. Whereas the teachers that didn't, I found didn't really do well in those courses. I couldn't sit still, like I couldn't hear over, like, I think a lot of people call it monkey chatter, just ongoing in my head. And that was like a way for me to absorb the information. So like people need to like get up and walk around during, not expecting people to do what is the norm when they're in like a workshop, I think is ways that we can create safer spaces for people who are neurodivergent and have mental health. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Ysabelle, what about you?
I think community consultations are always appreciated to hear from the community directly. I think having multiple spaces, like sometimes having like a quiet area or a low sensory area, like for me, like I'm visually impaired and I definitely appreciate darker spaces. I find a lot of the spaces are way too bright. I think having like things like to know what to expect in advance, to be able to have like visual stories, or ask, is there anything you need? Sometimes when you register for something, you can ask, what your access needs are, or anything that we can do to increase your participation, things like that, like multiple feedback channels, having people around. I've heard of things like having like an active listener. There's all kinds of things really, but I think, I echo what Queen said also about like normalizing, or sorry, oh yeah, I guess normalizing stimming behaviors, having like something like a visual note taker too can be more engaging for some minds. But yeah, having even just having things recorded, because then if you weren't paying attention, you can see it again and watch it again, and there's all these things. I mean, but I think, yeah, just talking to people and getting to know them, then you become more and more familiar with what a person may need in a certain situation.
Yeah, those are all wonderful ideas. Salima, did you have something to add?
I just put in a resource that kind of talks a bit more about relaxed performance. I don't know why that didn't click beforehand, but I don't really have the headspace to talk about it, so I just added a link towards it right now.
Great, yeah. Yeah, those are all easy things that people could do today for their events, right? Having maybe a quiet space, listening to people, to what they need, having open-end access questions, not just say, do you need these things, but leave a space for where someone can fill in what they need. It's very important.
Organization too, I think helps. Like I find like I'm helping some folks with like to kind of mentor them in being more professional in their art practice, and a lot of it is problems with like, how do I get confused, or there's all these things, and it's like just having like a structure where things can be organized like seems to help a lot for a lot of people, to get rid of that overwhelm, be like, no, it's not as complicated, put things in plain language and just kind of use so many acronyms and have things that are kind of clear. It seems like common knowledge to me, but I guess it isn't for
No, that's a very good point. Having some sort of access guide where people can see ahead of time, maybe what the venue looks like, what's offered at the venue, what's going to happen, what's expected of you or not expected of you, takes away a lot of that anxiety that I think folks can feel going to a new space or a new event or new people, or even an old space and old friends. It helps just make folks more comfortable.
Yeah, I was gonna add on, like, even like having like questions in advance. I know some panelists are like, oh, I don't want the questions to feel like rehearsed and stuff like that too. And I understand that, but for me, I get anxiety really bad before a talk, even if I've talked about the same thing like a million times. Sometimes even having the questions, I still get anxiety, but I find it's more helpful having the questions in advance, because I'm able to, like, even if I'm not writing it down or taking notes, I can formulate my thoughts prior to having the conversation as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else have more thoughts on this this last question?
Yeah, I think learning from previous experiences, right? Like, I feel like every time there's another person that enters your space, that there's an opportunity to learn of, like, yep, well, we need to do these things, because next time they enter the space or somebody else, or to, to kind of think ahead. Think ahead.
Yeah,
that's say about that.
No, that's a wonderful idea to think about ahead of time. Who do you expect at your event? And is if you're not expecting certain people, why not? And how can you make them welcomed?
Inviting them even.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I used to do, I forget what it was called now, audience development. So part of my role was to, I would read like feedback that we would get from the gallery space. And some of them would be complaints, and how do I transfer those complaints into like actions to improve the space? And a lot of it was kind of like accessibility, like, why isn't there nowhere to sit in the gallery was a complaint. It's like, well, put a bench here. Let's these are easy things. A lot of these things are very easy things, and it's like, for whatever reason, people kind of keep the status quo a lot of the time, or they don't have to, or it's not on the radar. They don't think about it. It's not a priority. So they don't make time for it. Right?
Absolutely. And we had someone in the chat, Alice, saying that having a quiet area, if it's too noisy, is very helpful. Yeah, so that's a great example as well. Great. Well, I think we're at that point where we can open up to questions from the audience. So if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, feel free to write it in the chat or raise your hand, or however it is you feel like asking.
I love questions, by the way.
Well, while we wait, I will throw you guys that surprise question that I had for you earlier, which is, what benefits do you get from your disability in your art? So the example that I gave was, because of my borderline personality disorder, that means I'm very sensitive. So I'm very empathetic to others, and I can very easily put myself in their situations. So I find that it's easy for me to bring care into my administration work. But physically in my artwork, because I'm a little bit slower, I can pay attention to those details more and kind of draw on those details with the time I take. So I wonder if you guys have experienced that, some benefits you get from being a part of the disability community.
I would say there's two parts, I guess, to mine. When I first started exploring what it means to be like bipolar 2, I spoke to several Afro-diasporic spiritual leaders, and culturally, like, the diagnosis was described to me as, and I'm an Afrofuturist, so it was described to me as like existing on several planes at the same time. So I'm on these, I guess, the metaverse, different metaverses. It could be described in that way. And my physical body is existing in one, but my mental brain is existing in all at the same time, why I see all these random scenarios coming at me all at once, while these random thoughts are coming at me all at once. So thinking about, centering, being able to center myself in the present, while understanding that my spiritual selves are existing in these different planes, and I can tap in to any one of them. I feel like that's one benefit, being able to think about it creatively, I guess, in that way, has been helpful and healing to me. And then the Zentangle art, like I can sit for hours and be like hyper focused on this one thing and make like these really, really intricate pieces, and everyone's usually like, how did you do that? And I just get like lost in the work, and it just feels, I feel like full. I feel full after creating the pieces, and people understanding them after is a bonus. But yeah, like the hyper focus, even though like there's all these things coming at me all at once, being able to hyper focus, being able to predict a bunch of different scenarios and possibilities, how multiple things can go wrong, how multiple things can go right, and being able to use that as like a plan for like contingencies, I guess. Yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
No, those are great disability gains. Absolutely. What about Ysabelle, Salima? Do you guys find you get any disability gains being part of the community?
When I was younger, I had all these tools, like I stood out quite a bit. I had like a raised desk. I had the glasses with like a telescope on it. I had a giant telescope for other reasons. You know what I mean? Like I stood out a lot. So I got used to these like embarrassing things, because when you're young, everything you do different is embarrassing. And it's like, I don't care. I'm free from that, like, I don't care if I look weird. And I think it's a great thing to be free of. So my disability has helped me to be more assertive. I am definitely not the most assertive person. It's still something I'm learning to do, but it definitely, if I didn't have it, I'd probably be quite unassertive. Actually, I'd be quite shy and wouldn't, like, there wouldn't be much of a reason to, but it kind of forces you to practice and ability, fine tune your ability to communicate with people and problem solve, because it helps me to be extra creative, because it's like, okay, you didn't think about this. Okay, here are the solutions I have. What if, we try to come up with these ideas, and sometimes the ideas are, ridiculous, but they work. And it's fun, it creates this element of fun, which works well in an art space, So one of the projects that I'm doing this summer is a second artist in residence outside. And for me, my visual impairment, bright spaces is quite taxing, because the pupil in my eye, that black hole, is supposed to shrink when there's a lot of light. Mine just stays open. So I'm like, ah. So to be outside to try to paint is not conducive, right? But I'm like, I want to participate in this artist in residency outdoors. I like the location. I think it's interesting, and I want to. And I was like, how can I find a way to participate? So I thought, what if I created like a sort of tent, like a sort of structure where there would be shade and there would be ways for me. So I'm thinking about the built environment that I'm building, all these things. So like that would have been, and I thought about that when I was younger, I used to work in an office, and I thought, like, I had so much anxiety about being like, well, what if I'm in a call center, or like in a what do they call it, like a Walmart even, or whatever, like a space where it's like all these lights, you can't just dim one. And it's like, what if I had a tent? Wouldn't that be weird? But wouldn't that work? And it's one of those ideas. It's like, now it's working. It's working for me now. And I think it's just so fun to have that like rewarding idea kind of come into place, and to make that less weird for other people who that might work for, and find ways that I just love seeing an idea come to life, like some sort of concept that's not visible become visible, and then see how that manifests itself and all the possibilities that go with it. I have like a newly acquired disability. I'm still kind of navigating that. its gifts, because so far I feel like it's betraying me a bit, but I'm sure with more reflection, I will learn to appreciate it more. Definitely, it encourages me to slow down, to be more mindful, to choose the things that I like, priorities that I want to do, because I only have a window of time that I feel good to do these things. And I'm the type of person, I want to do all the things. I want to live all the lives, and I don't want to choose. And so I have this wrestling a little bit with that, but yeah, and I mean, I'm sure like I said, there's other things upon more reflection, but I'm curious what Salima has to share.
Hi, it's Salima speaking. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little uncomfortable with the question because I mean, having a neurodegenerative illness, it's hard to consider it as a gift. On the other hand, I do feel eternally grateful for the disability arts community. I feel like the dignity and the love and the joy that I feel with my fellow disabled artists is priceless. And I would say that that's kind of more what I feel comfortable sharing about that. That's the end of my thought.
Absolutely. The disability community is one of the first places that I felt welcomed and could be myself. So I definitely echo that for sure. Okay, so now that we've had that question, we have a few in the chat. Sandra Hool wanted to ask a question. I don't know if the STEPS people could unmute her so she could ask a question.
I think I can unmute. I think it's working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra. Thank you so much for being here. It's been great to listen to you. I don't have a very well formulated question, so I'm just going to say what I'm thinking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I used art a lot when I was going through different mental health issues, and it became a really important part of my life. In parallel, I work as an occupational therapist. So I do work with people with various disabilities, and I've come to, I guess, a place where sometimes I struggle to speak or research or think about art in, I guess, more of a therapeutic way versus more of an advocacy, disability movement kind of way. And sometimes I find myself at a bit of a complicated nexus. So I guess using art to cure versus using art to just be and explore and for well-being. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I think some of you mentioned you also have a background in social work, so you might have that also that experience with having to kind of hearing the clinician kind of points of view, as well as the disability community's points of view. So yeah, any thoughts that you can share on that, I would love to hear.
Can I get you to repeat the question?
Yeah, just I guess when I've done some research on how I could utilize art in practice, I've come across some I guess hesitancy with using it in a therapeutic, more, I guess, with a more curative kind of aspect. But I found it to be really helpful in terms of just managing my own mental health. So I would like to share it with other people without it necessarily coming across as trying to fix a disability or mental health, for example.
Well, for me, including narratives and looking at it from because someone who's not doesn't have their master's or their doctorate in like social work. So you can't practice art therapy, but you can practice art healing exercises. So researching things around that. And for me, I like to include anything around like narrative-based themes and storytelling and retelling stories of resistance and resilience. So looking at those types of things as like a tool for like understanding yourself better and navigating yourself better has been helpful for me. And also when building like workshops or facilitating workshops that are inclusive of those things. And we try to include art healing in everything that we do, myself and Nico. Yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, art therapy has like anybody can do art as therapy, right? Like art is inherently therapeutic, right? It has this kind of healing. It's a way of communicating, really, is what it is. You're kind of communicating non-verbally through like a visual or music medium or what have you. So I mean, I don't know what the pushback is in the sense of like the accreditation part and all that, because there is definitely that debate there. But I do agree with the storytelling. Like, I feel like persons with disabilities sometimes are like these celebrities. Like the community knows that one, like I was that one blind person in my school, right? And people know who I am, but I don't necessarily know who they are. Like people 2-3 grades ahead of me, and they're like, oh yeah, they know who I am. They'll be like, hi, do you remember me? And I'm like, I really don't. Because we never actually talked. You just know of me, like a weird celebrity thing. And they don't get to know me as a person or hear what I have to say as an individual, right? Which is a very different thing. And I find that there's not a lot of spaces to talk about those things. So if there's not a prescriptive, okay, everyone, we're going to do this thing and we're going to do it this way and you're going to do this. And, instead of like what they want to say kind of comes out naturally is favorable in my opinion, but it's just me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Hi, it's Salima speaking. I think that I would actually be careful about like evoking hope. I feel like the Debbie Downer here, but like, I mean, using like kind of words like cure, healing, and things like that. Like, I think that there's a responsibility that comes with that. And I think that like, being like, I stopped being a clinician. I kind of have left it behind now. But in my practice, I did use photography, I did use art, but I made sure to honor the lineage of where I was getting these ideas from. What are the side effects potentially? Because I think that it is important to recognize that sometimes creative exploration can bring up a lot of like emotion and a lot of pain sometimes, and you never know what can be triggering for someone. You never know. And I think that like it's important to make sure that you have the capacity to hold that what comes up and you have the skills for that. And if you don't, have the ability to be transparent about what might happen, and have the skills of how to help around that. I think maybe bringing in a separate person to be with you, or maybe just like giving it as an offering and letting people know like how it was for you. But I think that like there's a reason why there's like art therapy training that's at a certain level. I think that there's a reason why there's like a lot of like ethics that come around that. And I would actually be a bit hesitant to offer things if I don't absolutely have certainty, or as much certainty as possible, that I have the capacity to hold whatever will come up. That's the end of my thought.
Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
Great. So we have another question in the chat from Tina, who's wondering if we know of any books, journals, artists, movies, videos, or podcasts about crip theory or disability representation, So if you guys can think of anything, just feel free to throw it on the chat. Mommy Chi wrote, I felt like the experience that I've gotten from having a disability was to be able to differentiate my feelings as not normal from others, thus giving me visual looks about how I, as few others, as invisibles, and thus those overlooked feelings become in a way that translate into one's work that essentially become the unique experience that has the same notion of display, different, unique, original. So that's very interesting. Tina says, being weird is radical, and I'm 100% with her on that. And then we have I think we're out of time. So I think that's it for the questions. I think Belinda wants to do some closing words, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, Salima, Queen Ysabelle, for joining us. It's been a really lovely discussion with you guys. Belinda?
Thank you. Thank you all. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I've just had a wonderful time listening in and learning along with everybody else. I would like to thank Jenel for doing an amazing job at moderating this talk. It's been such an amazing and important discussion. And as well as thanking all of the panelists, of course. Thank you, Salima, Ysabelle, and Queen, for providing all of this knowledgeable information. I really appreciate also, Ysabelle, for you mentioning Accessibility Week and Disability Awareness Week. This was definitely intentional for us to hold this talk during this week to further raise awareness and hold space for these important discussions to take place and have this dialogue. I appreciate all of the conversation about anticipating needs, and I really liked, I think, Jenel, you mentioned about the access guides, and also Salima, you mentioning about like even within grant proposals, having a lot of these accommodations be incorporated into the work. And I would also like to further normalize accommodations being a part of project planning and event planning as opposed to being an afterthought, and also having conversations about different disabilities and learning disabilities, neurodivergency, invisible disabilities, as opposed to sort of just thinking about physical disabilities. So yeah, I've just had an amazing time listening and having this discussion with you all. So thank you all for joining us. I would also like to thank our funders. The CreateSpace Residency is supported by the City of Toronto as a part of ArtworxTO, Toronto's Year of Public Art, TD Bank Group through the TD Ready Commitment, Canada Council for the Arts, and Ontario Arts Council. This panel discussion is also generously supported by the Bulmash-Siegel Foundation. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening, wherever you are, and we appreciate you all for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
You as well. Thank you so much to Christina Morden, our ASL interpreter tonight. Thank you for being here.